And welcome into the Monday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 102.5-106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. We got a whole lot going on today in the world of sports. Joe Rexrode, good morning. How are you?
Awesome. If a weekend in which you ingest 600 calories, which I think is a great way to lose weight, is awesome, then I've had an amazing weekend. So I just like to tell everybody out there, if you buy berries, make sure you don't eat old berries.
Yeah, that would be good. That's a tough one for you.
Well, I like berries a lot, I like berries. But there were some berries that were purchased before I got back home last week, and I didn't realize it. And they were like in there. It's a bad deal. So, hey, man, I'm losing weight, bro. That's the good news.
That is the good news. Nick Keyser, good morning. Happy Monday. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, guys, I guess we're looking forward to a total eclipse event later this afternoon. So
don't look directly into the sun.
I will not. Robby has advised me several times, Joe, to not look. What do you say?
Well, just don't look in the sun. I mean, you can look at the eclipse. Just make sure you have the proper equipment on,
You want to know if I had a different take on it?
I mean, he said it like I would do it for sure earlier when he walked in this morning.
I'm just looking out for you, man. I don't want you to be like, oh, my goodness, I can't see anymore because I've looked directly at this thing. Just looking out.
I would not have expected you to be tempted, but now that we're talking about this, please don't.
Yeah, no, exactly. This was under the assumption from Robby Stanley that I'd be looking at the sun later this afternoon at 2 o'clock.
I'm just trying to look out. I'm like,
thank you.
I'm a new dad. You try to guide young ones. That's what I'm doing now. I'm trying to guide you a little bit.
Yeah, preventive measures are good. They're never bad. Though if someone would have said, hey, are you sure those blueberries are the ones that you bought? No. Oh, maybe look at them a little closer, right?
What berries, Joe? What berries just did all this work to you over the weekend, Joe?
Well, it's my assumption, but it's blueberries.
Yeah.
And that's all I've been able to taste the last couple days. But there were some, like I said, some old blueberries that were in the fridge that I didn't realize were old.
There you go.
So then I threw them in a thing of yogurt with granola, which is one of my favorite snacks.
And now you're on a weight loss program.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Thanks for asking, Nick. Thanks for clarifying the berries.
Yes. Let Nick doing some investigative work here. We got a whole lot to get to on the program here today. We'll be joined by Sean Rourke from NHL.com at 7:30. The Predators' magic number down to 1. And they were just about in the playoffs last night with the Blues and the Ducks going to a shootout. So it was close, but the magic number down to 1 for the Nashville Predators. We'll get into that with Sean, get into some possible matchups with him as well. Corey Curtis from News 2 at 8 o'clock for his weekly visit. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic will join us at 8:30, so a lot to get to on that front. And, Joe, between the Predators, their weekend, John Calipari is apparently leaving Kentucky and going to Arkansas. The women's national championship game was yesterday. The men's game is tonight, and the Lady Vols have hired a head coach. We got a whole lot to get into on the program today. This is one of those days where we could probably do about a 7-hour show.
We could. I'm cool with 3, though. Let's do it in 3.
Let's see if we can do it in 3. We begin on the Nashville Predators. So a split bag for the Preds this weekend. They go on the road to the Islanders, and they played pretty well against the Islanders. They got shut out in the game. They had over 90 shot attempts and just could not for the life of them get a puck by Semyon Varlamov on Saturday. So a disappointing result. The process, for the most part, was pretty good for the Predators on Saturday. And then yesterday, Joe, they're trailing 2-1 in the third period, and I again thought they were playing reasonably well. But if you get to the end of that one yesterday and you lose again, nobody really cares about if you're playing reasonably well this time of year. It's about winning and losing. And the Predators get a gigantic goal on the power play from Luke Evangelista to tie it at 2. Goes to a really back-and-forth 3-on-3 overtime that I thought was really entertaining. And then in the shootout, the Predators get there for just the 3rd time this year, and they win it again. Ryan O'Reilly with a goal in the shootout. UC Saros makes 3 saves, and the Predators get a big win last night. So the Predators, with their magic number with 3 points heading into the game, they bring it down to 1. St. Louis and Anaheim go into overtime last night. So St. Louis was up 4-2 and then up 5-3, and the Ducks came back and tied it. Ducks had a couple of great looks in overtime, and they get to the shootout. St. Louis able to outlast them in the shootout. So the Preds have not clinched a playoff berth yet, but a big win last night, Joe, in New Jersey to put them right on the cusp where if they get into overtime on Tuesday against Winnipeg, they're in. Obviously, if they win, they're in. They're right there on the cusp of another playoff berth.
Yeah, how about Evangelista and the power play, that little switcheroo, I mean, just in the last week, and what a huge goal for him. So basically to me, it's like, the Blues are toast, and it's just a matter of time, but I think it's kind of nice that the Preds get a chance to actually do it themselves and clinch at home Tuesday, kind of makes for a big deal, for a nice deal for them. But I mean, it's a gutty win for them, because like you said, you can play some good hockey and not get the results, and at some point it's like, well, gee, I mean, great, but you must not be playing that well,
right,
if you keep not getting the results. So I think that's a pretty big time win for them.
It's a big time win for them. Last night, in terms of like the playoff matchups, a huge game between Dallas and Colorado. Dallas goes on the road to Colorado and wins 7-4. So those two both have 4 games left, and Dallas is up by 5 points. So Dallas essentially wrapped up the division last night. I mean, I guess they could collapse here and lose out, and Colorado could win, and then you could switch things around. But after losing to Chicago on Saturday, which I thought could be a damaging loss for the Stars, they rally. They win 7-4 last night. So the playoff picture is starting to come into the fold here. Preds are kind of back and forth right now between the first wild card spot and the second. The Kings won and jumped up past Vegas the other night in the Pacific. So right now the Kings are in 3rd in the Pacific. Vegas is the second wild card. Preds are the first wild card, and Vegas has played 2 less games than the Predators have. So it's going to be kind of a seesaw back and forth as to what happens at the last part of the standings here. But a couple of big results yesterday, both from the Predators' standpoint and then with Dallas taking down Colorado. Dallas has essentially locked up the top spot in the Central Division.
Going in there, putting up a touchdown. That's
yeah.
That's the Dallas, man. They deserve wagon status right now. So basically, yeah, you know basically that they're going to be right at the top there, and they're probably going to be the 1 seed all the way around. Another thing that's to keep an eye on, I think Vancouver and Vegas play maybe tonight. Is that right? But
that sounds right. Let me look. It is.
They play soon. I know that, but Edmonton has a game in hand, and they're 3 points behind Vancouver.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to remember. This could still end up with like the Preds playing the Oilers in the first round.
By the way, yes, Vegas and the Canucks tonight. So that's another big game in terms of
the biggie.
The team right behind you, and a team that you could see in the playoffs coming up as well. So the picture starting to come into the fold. Predators are 1 point out of clinching this thing here, and then we'll see how it goes. I thought, Saros last night I thought it was really good again. I mean, Jack Hughes had an absolute laser to start the game off with, which a wrist shot, Joe, was clocked at 92 miles an hour. It was a 92-mile-an-hour wrist shot from Jack Hughes last night on the Rust that was put in the perfect spot. Yossi with a blast that hit poor Kakinen in the midsection last night.
Yeah, it's a toughie. Yeah,
not fun to watch.
The region.
Yeah. It was immediate pain from him. He goes out. Jake Allen comes in. The Predators, even yesterday, like they had a couple of really good looks that they, for whatever reason, right now they just can't get to go. Like they got shut out against Boston. They had 6 goals against St. Louis. Now 2 of them were empty net goals. 2 more on the power play. So like 5-on-5 right now, trying to get the puck in the back of the net is a little bit of a struggle. I mean, New York, they were all over the Islanders. I mean, over 90 shot attempts. I think their expected goals was over 6 in that game, and they didn't score at all, which was really, it was quite something to watch. The fact that they couldn't get one of those to go on Saturday against the Islanders. Yesterday, I thought a lot of really good looks again that Jake Allen made good saves on. So they're fighting through it a little bit right now offensively. Big to get the win last night, but they got to start finding a way. Like I tweeted this, generating the chances is one thing, and that's great, and you certainly feel better about your game when you're generating the chances than when you're not. But this time of year, Joe, it is also about, like, you got to finish. You don't have time to run into like a 5-game cold streak offensively. If you do that, you're going to be out of the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I do think you're talking about a goalie having just one of those. Sometimes you're just going to have that on one particular day.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, obviously during their stretch, it wasn't just expected goals; it was goals too. That they were elite in that, actually finishing too. So they could use a touchdown game like Dallas just had in Colorado.
Yes, they could. We're off and running on Robby and Rexrode. We're taking your thoughts. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on the Preds. They are 1 point away from clinching a playoff berth yet again. We'll take your thoughts on that. We'll also get to John Calipari coming up, apparently heading to Arkansas. We'll get Joe's thoughts on that, take your thoughts as well. All that coming up. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Hey, Robbie Stanley here. Tonight is the bittersweet end of the tourney, but FanDuel lets you make it a little bit sweeter. Whether you're betting on the favorite or the underdog, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, look, we've been talking about Purdue the whole tournament. I'm going to stick with them. They've been my pick the whole time, but this is the game I think a lot of people have really been waiting for. UConn taking on Purdue. I think it's going to be really close, but I'll stick with Purdue to get it done tonight. You can take it any way you want to take it. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, or anything else that catches your eye. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com/Rob and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets, which will be tonight. Must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
Ryan O'Reilly now for the Predators. O'Reilly 2 of 2 on shootout tries. Comes in right side, cuts across to his left, hesitates, shoots, and scores! Ryan O'Reilly gives the Predators the edge here in the shootout.
Ryan O'Reilly gets it done in the shootout last night. UC Saros makes all 3 saves in the shootout. Preds win 3-2 via the shootout. They are 1 point away from clinching another playoff berth. That would be their 9th playoff berth in the last 10 years, Joe. So that's a pretty good run. Taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025, our phone number. Big goal by O'Reilly last night. Officer Watson in Clarksville says, "Are we sure we're good with playing with Dallas in the first round?" Looks more and more daunting, was my response. Stars continue to play well. Dustin in Hopkinsville saying, "The passes are killing me. I can't count how many times they wrap around the net and never shoot on the inlet or outlet. I'm happy and excited, but in my coaching mind, I've seen some trends that I don't like going into the playoffs. Slow starts, too many passes," and Dan Highnote mentioned and Chris Mason mentioned shooting instead of looking for the perfect shot. I do think, Joe, sometimes, especially like on Saturday, when the goalie's playing out of his mind, you try to make like the perfect read to get to him. And I think at times they did that. Now they also put up over 90 shot attempts. So
I was going to say, when you have that many shot attempts, but sorry, I just interrupted you rudely.
Okay.
But also, you know what? You bring up something where Keyser has these stats that he tells us during the break. Say your stat on the air, Keyser.
So on Saturday, and this was interesting to me just looking back after the game, the Preds had 33 blocked shots. Since blocked shots have been tracked since 2005, that was the second highest blocked shot total that the Predators have ever had in team history.
Wow. And talking about their shots being blocked.
Yes, their shots being blocked. The most was 36 against the Flames in 2015-ish, I think, something like that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that was a interesting stat that I found out after the game. But also, it's very noteworthy to say that Semyon Varlamov was playing out of his mind.
He was.
He looked like his prime mode for sure.
He was. He played great. So, I mean, there is something to the fact, Joe, that like when you see a goalie do that, you just tip your cap and move on and realize that if you play like that most nights, you're probably going to score about 4 or 5.
Right. And as far as the overpassing, I mean, I think there's also just the power play thing, right? Yeah. Like sometimes it's shoot or sometimes it's move the puck quicker, which is what they talked about last week. And all of a sudden we saw it come to life and the power play looked really good, in the Thursday game. So, but yeah, it's always like, I think whenever, for whatever reason, pucks aren't going in, all those things get looked at and it's easy to fall into like overpassing, trying to be too perfect, things like that. Sometimes you just have to get up on the net.
Tyler says a new question for Preds fans has come up. It's starting to look like Edmonton might overtake Vancouver, and Dallas looks like a buzzsaw. I don't know who I'd rather see in the playoffs. Edmonton playing very well right now. By the way, Ekholm just annihilated Mikko Rantanen the other night and then scored a goal after that. So they continue to look really good. Joe, I've fully made the switch. Vancouver, my preferred opponent for the Nashville Predators. Dallas is I get to travel and it's not like I don't think they can hang in there with Dallas because I think they can. But Vancouver is my desired opponent if I'm a Nashville Predators fan. And I don't care that it's on the Pacific side of the bracket.
Yeah, Dallas looks like the team that's quote-unquote peaking at the right time. That's still, in this tournament, sometimes that team still falls in their face, and the team that limps in makes a run and all that stuff. But, yeah, they just do look very scary. So, yeah, Vancouver, as you've pointed out before, kind of the lack of playoff experience on that team, and then especially when you compare it to the Preds, that could be potentially a thing that could help the Preds. So yeah, that seems like the right now the smart money. Vancouver.
It does seem like the smart money. We'll see if they hold off Edmonton. Again, a huge game tonight, as you pointed out, between Vancouver and the Vegas Golden Knights to see. That's going to go a long way in determining whether or not they win the division. So we'll see what happens on that front tonight. We'll have Sean Rourke from NHL.com coming up at 7:30. We'll get into his thoughts on the Predators, his thoughts on some potential playoff matchups that we could see as well. Joe, in the meantime, while this was all going on last night, the Predators game had just gone final. I was watching St. Louis and Anaheim to see if the Predators were going to wrap up a playoff spot last night. and I start to scroll through the old Twitter and see some buzz about John Calipari and Arkansas coming together to negotiate a contract, and that Calipari could be the next head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks. Now, we've gone through the Kentucky situation of obviously they got beat by Oakland. It's been rough there in terms of their postseason results. The fan base, I think, largely has had enough of John Calipari, but it felt like he was coming back. I mean, he did his little radio show and talked for an hour about how excited he was to be back and to compete and to get back in the lab and work and all those things. And late last night, Pete Thamel finally reporting that John Calipari finalizing a 5-year deal to be the next head coach at Arkansas. That deal is expected to be completed sometime today officially, and it looks like Calipari is out of Kentucky and is going within the conference to be the head coach at Arkansas. What do you make of this that kind of seemingly, Joe, came out of nowhere last night, that John Calipari is leaving Kentucky and will now be the next head coach at Arkansas?
Absolutely wild. Oh my goodness. I've heard then the people have already got the illustrations of Calipari and like the Bobby Petrino neck brace thing. I mean, that's all right. I think I retweeted one of those. So check that out if you'd like to.
Oh, I would.
Yeah. First of all, think about the domino effect here. A couple weeks ago, SMU fired Rob Lanier. For people who don't know who Rob Lanier is, Rob Lanier was Rick Barnes' top assistant at Tennessee and was also with him at Texas. Is fantastic coach. And I think one of the real foundational coaches of this program has become at Tennessee. And they fired him after 2 pretty good seasons, like out of nowhere. Like, what are you doing? Apparently, the reporting has come out since that they wanted a bigger name to go into the ACC, which I forgot they're in the ACC, which is the dumbest thing ever.
It is.
So they fire him. Like 2 days later, Rice hires him. Like, oh, we'll take him. What are you doing? SMU goes out and gets Andy Enfield from USC, which is also weird. Okay, so you're going to SMU. Okay. And then USC gets Musselman from Arkansas, which is also kind of weird, actually. Like, all of it's weird.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden that creates this opening. And, the Tyson chicken, I mean, also for people who don't know, Arkansas has some of the richest people back in their program that like any college sports program.
Yes.
Like Arkansas is filthy rich if it wants to be. And so whatever the guy's name is, Tucker Tyson or Taylor Tyson, or I don't know, what are the Tysons? It's like good buddies with Calipari. Look, there's been whispers, and I don't know, maybe Kyle Tucker said this on our show. I don't know, but there's definitely been whispers over the years of Calipari having this desire to go somewhere else and stick it to them and be like, okay, well, this is what you're not appreciating. So, I mean, I'm all the way here for it. I mean, talk about fascinating. Calipari at Arkansas and what he might do there, and all of a sudden being a rival of Kentucky. Man, it is going to be something else. It is going to be fun to watch. And of course, now you've got one of the true blue bloods of the sport with an opening, and there's a lot that could go on there. I will say to the Alabama fans who are excited about that first Final Four, hold tight, folks.
Yeah.
Hold tight.
Yeah. I mean, I think Nate Oates is probably going to get a look here. Maybe he's not the way that they go, but I think certainly some consideration from the Kentucky side of things. One thing I do agree with, and I saw a few different people tweeting about this last night. Like, when Saban left Alabama, there was, Dan Lanning or Mike Norvell, like all these different coaches basically used it to get contract extensions or raises, and you're going to see some of that with Kentucky, I think. Whether it's Nate Oates or somebody else, like you're going to see some college basketball coaches, if they don't take the job, I think trying to leverage it to get a new contract done with the place that they're currently at.
Yeah, no doubt. On that point, some interesting reporting around Arkansas search. Apparently, Chris Beard, Ole Miss, and Jerome Tang, Kansas State, turned him down. Apparently,
yeah.
Before, so Calipari was their third choice. What do you think about that, Cal? how do you feel about being Arkansas's third choice?
5 years for John Calipari. He's going from Kentucky to Arkansas to be the next head coach of the Razorbacks. We'll take your reaction to that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game. Score big this spring with Lee Company and the Nashville Predators in the 10K Power Play giveaway. Enter for a chance to win a Kohler home generator or $10,000 towards Lee Company home services. Go online to leecompany.com/giveaway to enter. It's the 10K Power Play giveaway. Contest entries are accepted until Saturday, April the 20th. Lee Company, all you need. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025. John Calipari out at Kentucky. He'll be the next head coach with the Arkansas Razorbacks. By the way, Pete Thamel putting it out there that his base salary is expected to be slightly less than the $8.5 million he's making at Kentucky, but with an incentive-laden contract with the ability to pass that number. So that is apparently the contractual details that Pete Thamel has thrown out there, Joe. So still some good money coming in for Calipari. We've lost Joe's money. There he is.
You got me?
We got you. I think that was Keezer's fault. We're going to blame him.
I hope that doesn't have anything to do with NCAA tournament wins. I tell you what, man.
Boy.
Hope those incentives are like amazing recruiting rankings and things like that.
Well, if so, he should make a lot of money.
He should do really well. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. Obviously he will recruit well. He's a good coach. I think more of him as a coach than you do. I think
there's no doubt.
But but I don't know, man. It's going to be because the thing is Kentuky's still Kentucky, so he may have to eat some Kentucky humble pie here. It's just interesting that he's going to a league rival, you know. I mean, hey, what was open, and that's a job that could pay him enough to make it worth his while.
I can tell you this: I have perhaps never looked more forward to anything in my entire life than I do the visual image that I hope is coming of John Calipari calling the Hogs. I've never in my life needed anything more than video evidence of him standing out there doing woo pig suey and calling the Hogs.
God, that does sound amazing. Like when Mike Leach did the cowbell thing, that was pretty great, you know? But, yeah, Calipari calling the Hogs. Wow.
I need it. I need it real badly. I think it has the chance.
Get it.
It has the chance to surpass the Brian Kelly family thing, which is hard to do. But I think we might be able to do it with John Calipari calling the Hogs here. David in Arkansas says, waking up and seeing Arkansas hiring Calipari was shocking. Maybe a fresh start, but who knows? I'm not sure whether to be excited or scared as a Razorback fan. I got a text that says Arkansas just won the lottery, low key. So a couple of people excited about this. Big Blue Nation on the text line says all the Big Blue Nation has to keep the same energy on Cal. This is from Gunner. I stand firm he wouldn't have made it back on the plane for me anyway. So Calipari, still the Kentucky fans apparently seem to be happy to be rid of him, Joe.
Yeah, and even the ones who aren't are going to say that, right? But I think that's true for the majority of the fan base. I mean, people want him out. And look, he was going to be basically coaching for his job this year. I mean, he was going into sort of a lame duck almost kind of year where he has to he has to at least get to the next weekend, I think the second weekend, or else he's probably going to be fired anyway in a year. So, from his perspective, I get it. Kentucky fans, I think definitely more of them are happy than not. David Ubben, a friend of the show, my coworker at The Athletic, who's from Arkansas, grew up going to Arkansas games, says Calipari moving elsewhere would be must-see TV, but as an Arkansan who talks to Arkansans, I'm not sure this is going to hit with the fans like they think it's going to hit. I'd hold off on scheduling a parade if they finish this hire. This is before, I guess, is it official now, I guess? Basically. So that's an interesting take, though. Like this isn't necessarily, look, when you fail and you're supposed to be doing something and then for several years you haven't, well, everybody expects Arkansas fans to just drop everything and think that this is the greatest hire in the history of Arkansas?
No, it is really interesting. Like, first off, to your point, I have no doubt that he's going to be able to recruit well. How well is he going to be able to recruit? Like, is he going to be able to create something like he did at Kentucky where he's getting that level of talent? Because, look, obviously, he recruited really well at Memphis. We know that he can recruit. But how much of that was also like the combination of him and Kentucky, right? The two in partnership together. Like you said, though, Arkansas, they got some money, and the NIL part of this It's going to be interesting to see how they put it together. So I have no doubt that he's going to be able to recruit. I am interested to see also when he goes to Arkansas, does his philosophy of how to build a team change? And he talked about that a lot on that hour-long radio show that he did when everybody thought he was coming back to Kentucky. He talked about like the philosophy of building a team and looking internally and seeing if they need to change up the way they do things. And we've talked about this. Like, it hasn't just been one and dones with him. I mean, he brought in Shebway. They've had some veteran-laden teams, or at least more veteran-laden teams than just the freshmen and sophomores that everybody just associates with them. But I am interested to see at Arkansas, does he take a little bit of a different approach in terms of building a team, stylistically building a team, and trying to have more veterans involved. And obviously you can do that more now with the transfer portal as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just, look, when he was at Memphis and in his early days in Kentucky, yes, great recruiter. Also, quote unquote NIL. NIL was in effect in some places.
It was.
Okay. So then it's almost you kind of like lose a little bit of an edge when it becomes pay for play everywhere to a point, but Kentucky has incredible resources. So does Arkansas. So yeah, how will he approach it? Will he approach it differently? I mean, I think it's obvious that, you look at UConn, they're a mix of top-notch high school recruits and some older guys and a little bit in the portal. Most of these teams that are here, I mean, Purdue it's just a bunch of like older now, well, sophomore guards, but obviously their star is old.
Yep.
They got some other older guys. They got one guy out of the portal who's been a nice add for them, Lance Jones. And other than that, it's all homegrown guys. Those are the teams playing for titles, not necessarily a bunch of NBA players, but I mean, that's the thing. It's like, if you're going to recruit a certain level of talent, you can't count on them being there for 4 years. So it really makes it an interesting situation. Yeah, I'm here. I'm definitely fascinated to see how it's going to turn out, and of course the Kentucky search too. Like, people are throwing Pitino out there. I mean, that's just, I can't even imagine the absolute joy that would bring. But
I can. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here for that for sure. But that's obviously, as it always is, just a big hire for the landscape of the sport.
Glenn from Greenbrier says it was just time. Both sides needed a fresh start. After a few losses next season, it was going to get ugly. Herb in Kentucky says, interesting that you guys in Tennessee are so convinced that people in Kentucky are okay with Cal leaving. How? From Twitter? I'm depressed, and thousands of other Kentuckians who don't use Twitter may not think it's good either. This is from Herb in Kentucky on the text line.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. I think, like I said majority. I'm sure there are some Kentucky fans sad, but I would think the majority. I mean, I don't know. That's the thing. It's always tough, right? Like,
if
Twitter,
Kentucky sports radio is any indication, yes, there are a lot of very happy Kentucky fans today.
Yeah, and I know that, especially in the moment after the loss to Arkansas, it's especially everybody's like, get him out of here. And then you embrace the idea of him being back. That's what's interesting. The fan base now has been like, okay, let's see one more year, Cal, and maybe he'll actually make a run and, well, great, So you've embraced it. You've kind of like, you've accepted it, and now all of a sudden he's gone. So maybe some more people are like, oh, no, actually, I did want him back for one more year. But I don't know, man. I feel like a lot of this fan base is out on him.
So where does Kentucky go from here? I mean, we've brought up Nate Oates. I mean, we have had people throw out Rick Pitino on the text line this morning. Dustin from Hopkinsville is throwing out Billy Donovan on the text line. What are some names that are intriguing to you, Joe, in terms of places Kentucky might look from here?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Nate Oates is an obvious place to look, and does Bruce Pearl get a look?
It'd be interesting.
I think he's a little older, and I think the idea of having a Nate Oates and knowing that you could potentially have, decade plus of Nate Oates probably would be more appealing. But I mean, Bruce Pearl is a good coach. Those two guys just in the SEC. Chris Beard, Arkansas talked to him. At some point, Chris Beard is going to take another job. I'd be surprised if that's the one. Scott Drew. He is basically Scott Baylor.
He
You know,
is.
there's one. I mean, he's a very good coach. Um, who else could be out there? Could a guy like, I mean, Sampson could look. Some people have thrown out Hurley. Danny Hurley is a guy who,
Yeah.
I mean, you at least have to try, right? You got to try to make the call. I don't hate the idea of Billy Donovan. I just don't know. It just comes down to, obviously he's a Pitino guy. He was a Kentucky assistant at Pitino, went to Florida, did great things there. Does he have interest in the college game and coming back into all this stuff? After coaching the NBA for quite a while, hasn't gone great in the NBA, but it's also a different life, and I'd say a better life than dealing with re-recruiting your team all the time.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Where should Kentucky go from here? Now that John Calipari is about to be the next head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks. We'll take your thoughts on that. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Hey, folks, if your bracket is busted, guess what? You're like a lot of people, including me, Joe Rexrode. But the great thing about FanDuel is you can bet on every game of the tournament. And there's one left, folks. Purdue, UConn, national title game tonight. Time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook because the dancing is almost over. New customers, you get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet does not win. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. Of course, you can pick who's going to win it all. I went with Purdue from the start of the tournament. I went from the start of the season, actually. And as daunting as UConn looks, I'm going to take Purdue in the points. That's what I'm going to do tonight. You do whatever you want to do. Make sure you visit FanDuel.com/Joe102. Bet on this last game before they cut down the nets. You must be 21 or older. Present in Tennessee. First online real money wager. Only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is now withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbet.fanduel.com. Gambling problem, call the Tennessee Red Line, 800-889-9789.
Tomorrow, your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click, the final edition of Preds Pick to Click of the season, coming up tomorrow. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with us tomorrow morning at 8:45. Pick to Click brought to you by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty. List your home with TJ to get your home seen, heard, and sold. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. John Calipari leaving Kentucky and going to Arkansas to be the next head coach of the Razorbacks. Taking your thoughts on that, taking your thoughts on potential coaching candidates for Kentucky to fill the opening as well. Let's go to our 1-on-2-5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Weston. Weston, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, guys. Part of this I want to take into consideration. I know when Saban just retired from Alabama and take this approach to it, Alabama didn't really go after that high-flying, high-caliber guys that we thought they would, such as like a Chris Beard, some of these guys out there. So if I'm going to go that approach to Kentucky to find a guy that you can kind of mature into your success, I'm looking at maybe Indiana State's head coach or maybe even Clemson's head coach. Those two guys would kind of be on a radar because they've had long-term success at those two schools for how long they've been there. So I would see maybe if they would be interested and see if they would appreciate the next opportunity.
Yep,
I'll hang up and listen.
Thanks for the call, Weston. Joe, that does bring up an interesting kind of philosophical approach here. Do you think Kentucky goes with the up-and-coming guy that they feel good about at maybe a lower program, or do they want to go just really spend money, go out there, bring in the star power head coach, be that a Pearl, be that an Oates, somebody else?
Well, Schertz is no longer the Indiana State head coach. He's the St. Louis head coach. And I guess that doesn't necessarily mean, that he couldn't take the quick jump after, getting a couple of the Blazers from St. Louis, Billikens, little gear, and then right on to Kentucky. But, I hear that. And actually, we're going to talk later about Tennessee hiring Kim Caldwell.
Yep.
And that goes along with that philosophy, too. But I think, it's funny, too. You mentioned Brownell from Clemson. I mean, he was supposed to be potentially fired this year. I mean, and then he takes him, deep in the tournament and all that. So, I mean, I think you're swinging big first, you're swinging big. I think Kentucky, if you look at Kentucky's history of coaches in the last, couple decades, the one guy that they kind of reached on who granted had done some really good things in a short period of time at Texas A&M was Billy Gillispie.
Yep.
And that turned out to be an absolute disaster. Tubby, was a good hire there. I mean, you can't complain about a national. He did as much as Calipari did, won a national championship, but he kind of got out ahead of the posse, so to speak, just like Calipari did here. Get out ahead of the posse a year before they come get you. After you again, underachieve. So, but I think Kentucky is going to swing big on the, the Nate Oates front. I mean, again, I'd give a call to Danny Hurley. I would absolutely try. And Donovan's another one of those. That's a really interesting situation. I mean, it's a lot of losing that he's done with that loser franchise, the Buffalo Bills, the Chicago Bulls. I don't know why I want to call them the Buffalo Bills, but they're kind of like the Buffalo Bills in a way. But does he want that? I just think right now it's so hard in both the NFL and NBA to convince guys to come back to the college ranks the way it is right now. Until they figure out the calendar and the portal and everything, it's just, it's the headaches have been multiplied many times over. So I'd be surprised if that got much traction, but who knows? I mean, he certainly has an experience and he has a history in Lexington.
John on the text line says, what about Mike Vrabel to Kentucky? He's a leader of men. Very well done, John. Just get Vrabel in there to Kentucky. Josh on the
Why the hell hasn't Vrabel got one of these college head coaching jobs?
Mike,
you guys lied to us. You lied to us.
Mike, your thoughts on the boxing one? You tell us about that.
Dumb that hurt the team.
Oh, just beautiful. Josh in Nashville.
His dad was a basketball coach, by the way.
I'm sure he was. Josh in Nashville says, is it too far-fetched for Kentucky to try to grab either Bill Self or Tom Izzo, our co-executive producer? What do you think of that, Joe?
Well, I think, especially with Izzo, and probably a little more with South too. I mean, Izzo's done in a short period of time. Izzo's pushing towards 70, just like Rick Barnes, and I think he's got very little time left. So that would have been, in fact, Kentucky, I know, poked around him before when they've had openings. So I think they really went after him. Maybe when they hired Gillespie, actually. You're leaving Kansas to go to Kentucky. Like, I don't see it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think you've got to get someone who's got a little more runway on their career. And again, like an Oates to me is I'd be very, if I was them, I'd be very interested in that.
Now, someone who may not have the runway that I do think is intriguing, I don't think would take it, but I'm with Kentucky fans that I'd probably make the call. What about Jay Wright, who, of course, was with Villanova, is now retired? I think does a pretty good job on the desk, by the way, during this tournament coverage. But could you make the money sweet enough for Jay Wright to consider coming back and giving it a whirl at Kentucky since he's been retired?
Yeah, again, make the call. Great coach, without question, and a guy who, now they had some very talented teams, but a little bit of a more with less coach, a little bit more like Izzo, in terms of, some NBA players, some very good players, but like not the absolute, like not the rosters like Calipari's had on some of these teams that have done nothing. The reporting around him leaving the game was very much like, I can't do this portal stuff. And so I think that that's probably going to stick. But sometimes the coach will leave for a little bit, and then they'll have that itch, and then they'll want to be back in. So definitely make that call.
Nate Oates has an $18 million buyout associated with him. Do you think that that's at all a hindrance to Kentucky making that move?
No. Good Lord, no. I mean, Kentucky right now, they just got jilted. They decided to let Cal have another year, and he said, "Thanks, suckers. See you later." They'll find every $1 million they can find under every rock to do whatever they need to do here. Yeah,
his buyout's $18 million. Bruce Pearl's buyout is $7 million, and Scott Drew's buyout is $4.5 million. This is all coming from Jeff Goodman on the Twitter.
Yeah, they'd pay them all at once if they could get Jay Wright or Danny Hurley. No, they will be paying. Stackhouse, I see Stackhouse momentum on the text line.
Maybe so.
Yeah, Mark Few, that's another one people throw out there. I just don't see it. I mean, look, and other people have called him before about jobs. I think he's a Spokane guy all the way. I mean, he was an assistant there back when Dan Munson was the head coach of Gonzaga, when they broke through in the 90s. And I just don't see him leaving right now. But whoever just mentioned Greg Campy, hell yes. I'll make it happen, baby.
Hey.
God, I love that Greg Campy is getting like all this love. Love it.
If you can't beat him, join him. Let's go bring him in.
That's right. As long as he can bring in Jack Golke, and he still has an 11th year of eligibility left before becoming an accountant at age 32.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll continue to take your thoughts, your suggestions for Kentucky as they try to find a coach, with John Calipari heading to Arkansas to become the next head coach of the Razorbacks. We'll have more on that throughout the program. Coming up next, we'll get into the women's national title game yesterday, the men's game coming up tonight, and by the way, the Lady Vols have hired a new head coach as well. There's a lot going on around here. We'll get into all that and more coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Broadcasting live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. We're taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025. Joe, the Women's National Championship game yesterday, South Carolina finishes the job. They finished the season undefeated at 38-0. They win 87-75 against Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes. First off, I thought a great game Friday night, Joe, between UConn and Iowa. It was back and forth. UConn got out to the early lead. Iowa came storming back in the second half. There was, for some reason, people that are really, 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 really mad about the illegal screen called on UConn, which I thought was pretty clearly an illegal screen, and I saw you barking at people on Twitter about that all weekend. But Iowa wins. They get to the final against South Carolina. And, Joe, it's pretty clear. Caitlin Clark started the game yesterday on fire. I think she had 13 points in the first 3 minutes. It was unbelievable to watch. But it was clear as the game went on that South Carolina is just too much. And we've talked about South Carolina all year, how good they are. Obviously, they finished the season undefeated. So an undefeated national champion. And I just, Caitlin Clark, I thought she was 5 of 13 for 3 yesterday. I thought she tried her best to keep her team in it. But South Carolina really is just too talented up and down the board, and they finished the job. And what a run by them this year. Another national title for Dawn Staley and company, and an undefeated one at that in a tournament, Joe, where they got tested a couple of times. Obviously, the SEC tournament, Tennessee had them beat and then just didn't guard them. So the undefeated part of it almost came to an end a couple of different times, but they get it done and finish the job.
Yeah, clearly the best team, without question. And I figured, when Caitlin Clark had 18 in the first quarter, so I'm like, well, there you go. That's what it's going to take. And, they did a great job. Raven Johnson did a really good job on her. And you could just see the legs going. Like some of her shots later were just coming up short.
Yep.
And they wore down. They wore Iowa down. Just clearly the best team, incredible team, program, coach, players. I mean, just really that's the flagship program now in women's college basketball, South Carolina. Then the Caitlin Clark thing, there's just still, the moving pick thing. I'll give Scott Van Pelt credit, for example, because they were all mad about it. Everybody was mad about it. And on the replay that ESPN kept showing, I get it because they weren't showing the leg extending.
Yeah.
Right. Once you saw a couple of the other angles, it's so blatant. Actually, there's an angle from the side of the UConn bench that Nancy Lieberman tweeted out. And it's if you watch it in real time, it's it would be egregious to not call it. You have to call it. I mean, it was the right call.
Well, it sets up one of my least favorite things in sports.
Beckers.
It sets up one of my least favorite thing in sports, Joe, you can't make that call in that situation because it affects the outcome of the game. It's guess what? If you don't call it, it also affects the outcome of the game. It drives me nuts.
Yes, absolutely. And so I agree. So I understand the idea of you'd rather see a basketball play decide the game, because I tweeted you'd rather see players, and I still am getting tweets from people well, players did decide the game by committing a foul. Yes, but you know what we're saying. People would rather see a shot go in or not, right? And that would not be a whistle, but you have to call it, and it was the right call. I mean, some people compare it to the Super Bowl. I still don't think the Super Bowl call was right on the Chiefs Eagles. That's just me. I didn't think that was the right call, but it's the same idea, which is if it is the right call, then you call it no matter when in the game it is. And you have to, because otherwise then you're giving, like you said, you're giving the unfair advantage to the other team, which is what that was. It was Paige Beckers actually coming off the screen for the shot. That was the key screen of the whole thing. You cannot do what she did. So that was, and Caitlin Clark all through the weekend, I'm seeing Diana Taurasi talking about, reality's coming. And maybe she's right. Maybe Caitlin Clark's go to the WNBA and just get, humbled and all. I'm sure there'll be some level of that, but the Caitlin Clark, that maybe it's just particularly UConn people because they're sad about not being like the best program anymore.
Yes.
I don't know, but just seems like there's a lot of bitterness that's not necessary, toward her right now. But I thought she handled it great. And also I thought props to Dawn Staley for handling everything she handled this week, and including idiotic questions that are, by an idiotic people who work for an idiot, but also for Dawn Staley, the way that she gave class to Caitlin Clark yesterday, I thought that was a really impressive. Just because she's right. I mean, Caitlin Clark did a lot for the sport this year, the last 2 years, but especially this year. And so I thought that was cool of Dawn Staley to do that. And then she also, by the way, I mean, I could just turn this into a Dawn Staley love fest. She goes out and all the TV reporters who came out to cover it, she gives them all one-on-ones on her own. Just said, let's go. Let's do all the one-on-ones on the court. Like, that's freaking cool, man.
And then there's the men's game tonight, Purdue and UConn, starting at 8:20, which for the life of me, I can't figure out why we're starting a national title game at 8:20 Central Time tonight, but apparently that's what we're doing. Purdue, UConn, we've been looking forward to this. It kind of feels like these two teams, Joe, have been on a collision course really all tournament long at this point. So we'll see what that looks like. I mean, UConn, Alabama, I thought did a pretty good job of hanging with them for the first half plus, and then UConn able to separate towards the end there. But a titanic matchup tonight between Purdue and UConn. Looking forward to this one, even if it is starting at like midnight tonight.
And it's been this way forever.
It makes
and I
no
still don't
sense.
understand it. Like, they don't think that people want their children to watch these games. What is wrong with 8 Eastern? Just right at the top of the hour, 8 o'clock Eastern.
I don't know. I don't get it.
That gets you done at about 10:30. Which is still late for kids, but it's the weirdest thing. Like, someone must have at some point done a story on why this is their choice, like why they think this is smart. Like yesterday, some people were like, man, it's too bad the women's game isn't in prime time. And as someone pointed out, I think it was Richard Dice pointed out, he's like, I mean, look at the NFL. Like, they love the Sunday afternoon window. It's a great ratings window, So what's wrong with 7 or 8 on Monday? I don't understand. But no, this game is the one we've been hoping to get. Most of the top teams played each other this year in some form or fashion. These two didn't. These are the clear top 2. I think it's a clear top 1 and then a clear number 2, and that's UConn and then Purdue. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we get a great game. Look, I give Alabama a lot of credit, man.
Yeah.
Alabama played their guts out, and in most games, most matchups, they win. I mean, and also Grant Nelson posterizing Donovan Clingan. At least they take that with them home. Especially they need that if they have to also wave goodbye to Nate Oates in 3 days. But that was an impressive performance by them. But I think tonight, it comes down to, can Donovan Clingan just straight up just guard Zach Edey and UConn not have to help at all? And if that's the case, then UConn's going to blow them out. But I'm not convinced it is the case. I mean, I'm very interested to see those two match up.
I am too. I mean, Purdue, they handled NC State. Our boy DJ Burns Jr., the magical run came to an end on Saturday. And look, I mean, that matchup is just Edey ended up with 20 points, 9 of 14 from the field, 12 rebounds. So, I mean, we knew that was going to be a tough matchup. He's what makes this really interesting, and not in terms of, just it being overly aesthetically pleasing to watch, but he's just such a problem there in the middle that can he basically wreck the game tonight and get Purdue in it? And then Purdue, we know this too about them. When they hit outside shots, that's what really makes them a problem, and they shot 40% from 3 against NC State. So they've been a really good three-point shooting team all year long. It didn't go that way against Tennessee, but can Purdue hit the long ball tonight? If they can, I mean, that's going to be their chance to get in there and win, I think.
Yeah, the number 1 3-point shooting team in the country, but that's so much about teams saying, well, we just have to double him or he's going to just score at will. And so then, boom, boom, swing, swing, wide open 3. So if UConn's 7-footer can actually just straight up guard him, then you're not going to have that rotation. And yeah, I don't think it's going to go well. I mean, UConn is just so loaded. They're so loaded, so aggressive. So I hope it's good. But this does remind me of a couple years ago. It was Baylor Gonzaga, but I mean, Gonzaga was they were the team. They were absolutely dominant, and Baylor came out and kicked their butt. And so maybe we'll be surprised, and Purdue will play well. Braden Smith was bad Saturday, and he's a good player. He should not have been one of the top 5 Bob Cousy or finalists, but he's a good player. He was bad the other night. He has to be his absolute best tonight.
Coming up next, the Lady Vols have hired their next head coach. We'll get your reaction to the hire coming up next on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Preds fans, don't miss this Wednesday night Smashville live show at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue at 6 o'clock. See your Preds star players up close and personal, plus your chance to get autographs and pictures as well. This week's special guests are Ryan McDonough and Luke Shin. Smashville Live brought to you by the Black Abbey Brewing Company and ESPN Bet Sportsbook. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Nobody's more excited than I am. I'll tell you that. This is amazing. Looking forward to hearing, listening to you guys, hearing what you want, hearing what your goals are, start thinking about that type of stuff. And then let's hit the ground running. I'm excited to be here, excited to get to work.
The Lady Vols have made a hire. Kim Caldwell will be the next head coach of the Lady Vols basketball team. Caldwell, coming from Marshall, Caldwell 217-31 in 8 seasons as a head coach. The Thundering Herd this year averaged 85.3 points per game. That was 4th in the nation. They forced 24.2 turnovers per game. That was 2nd in the nation, and they got their first 20-win regular season since 1990-91. So a historic season for Marshall. Kim Caldwell, the head coach, and Kim Caldwell in 8 seasons has done an outstanding job as a head coach throughout a couple different divisions, and now she takes the job at the University of Tennessee. So, Joe, the 4th coach in the history of the Lady Vols program. Kim Caldwell is the hire for Danny White. What do you make of the hire? What do you make of Kim Caldwell, her background, as she steps into a big task now as the next head coach of the Tennessee Lady Vols?
Well, this is a Danny White hire, and I know some Tennessee fans aren't happy about it. And I see some – I definitely saw some, like, you fired Kelly Harper for this sentiments, even among, like, national media, which, it is definitely a younger coach, so there's not a ton of achievement. But someone I talked to in the Tennessee Athletic Department yesterday said that the style of play was a huge draw here, and that she's very innovative. But you got to be, you got to be great, to be able to get it done at this job. I kind of like the hire. I mean, this is. It's an up and coming coach. I do like that there was not a Pat Summitt tree coach to me that was good enough. I mean, Carol Lawson had a good year this year at Duke. Like they pulled an upset as a 6 seed and got to the Sweet 16. So that's good. But I think going outside the Pat Summitt family was important. You just you have to. It's just too much to put on someone who is like a former Pat Summitt player, along with everything else at that job. And look, this is what Danny White does. I mean, Nate Oates, we've been talking about Nate Oates today. That's a Danny White find out of nowhere. I mean, Nate Oates, who, was not long before he hired him, he was a coach at Romulus High School. For anybody who else, for like me, is from Michigan for like 11 years, Romulus, Michigan. And he kind of got into the assistant realm, and Danny White found him and liked his innovative style of play, and the rest is history. And so this is, and Danny White likes even like Josh Heupel as a hire for him, right? Like, likes the kind of cutting edge system, young coaches who score points. So we'll see. I mean, welcome to the league. South Carolina is an absolute juggernaut, just won it all. Almost just completed back-to-back undefeated seasons. They were one Caitlin Clark heroic performance away from back-to-back undefeated seasons. And LSU's got Mulkey over there. And, by the way, even Kentucky. Kentucky now, their veteran coach of basketball is Kenny Brooks, who's been there a week. So, so welcome to the SEC. I mean, it's not an easy job. But I get it. I'd heard some, rumblings about her early, and I think I think there's some real promise with this hire, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out.
I'll say this, Joe. The one thing I do like, it was time to get outside of the Summitt tree, and to your point, there's not a ton of great options out there that are left and available. But I mean, look, I get it. I mean, Holly Warlick was hand selected by Pat Summitt. You go Kelly Harper after that, who obviously played for Summitt. I understand like the temptation and the draw if you're Tennessee, if you're Phillip Fulmer making these decisions with Kelly Harper to try to bring back the glory days, and for people that are familiar with the program and that love the program and all that stuff. And I do think there's a time and a place for those type of hires in college basketball, college football, whatever sports you want to name. I felt like this hire with Danny White should have been focused on going outside the bubble and finding the best available coach that you feel like is either an up-and-comer or, I was not opposed to somebody already established that they had as well that wasn't in the Summit tree, but I like that Danny White is kind of going outside the family here and bringing in somebody else. I mean, there just reaches a point, Joe, where it's time to do that with every program, and I think this program needs that. And we'll see whether or not this is the right hire and whether or not this works out with Kim Caldwell, but I do at least like that aspect of it, of going outside the family and bringing in somebody else.
Yeah, you had to do it. And Philip Fulmer probably should have. And again, Kelly Harper is a good coach. Has she done more than Kim Caldwell? Yes, but she also had a track record by the time Tennessee hired her that kind of told you, can she get it done at this level? Because really, NC State was a disappointment for her, and so sometimes it's like the unknown is undefeated. It's like, if you have a smaller resume, then there's no failures on there but if you look at Caldwell at a lower division, it was nothing. It was absolute, just dominant championship play. And again, I just talked about Kelly Harper at this level. What does that mean? And we don't know how it translates for Kim Caldwell, but recruiting, to me, you have to be competitive in every way, including NIL. And I've heard some complaints along those lines with Tennessee women's basketball relative to the other programs. So, you have to be competitive. But one thing about Danny White, man, he's very demanding AD, and he's also a very like the one thing I promise you as a coach is, like, you're not going to be at any sort of disadvantage from your peers. So I think she's going to have a real chance to recruit. I mean, Tennessee still has been recruiting well. Kelly Harper had been recruiting well, but the problem is it kind of dried up on her. Like, she had some really good recruits early. I mean, I think she had one signee for this class. Now, it was a McDonald's All-American, but one prospect, and she had gone, really, to me, like, too heavily into the portal. Now, I mean, it's a good thing she went and got Rickea Jackson out of the portal, right? But if you look at Holly Warwick's high school recruiting compared to Kelly Harper's, it was much better. So how do you get that back? Because it's still about, like, I'm watching South Carolina right now. These freshmen yesterday hitting all these huge shots. They're going to be there 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you can supplement, but if you are leaning that heavily on the portal, then I don't think you're going to have the continuity that you need to be a championship program. Part of that is, it's also like older players bringing young players along and sort of like program standards and things like that. I mean, you can't just be out poaching talent, all the time and having that massive turnover. And that, I mean, you can take that discussion to Calipari and his struggles too, by the way. Like, you have to have some continuity and some people who are in a program for a long time, not just one and done freshmen. Now we're talking men's basketball, or portal 1 or 2 year players. You have to have some people who grow with programs like Purdue and UConn tonight. They have that. South Carolina has that in women's basketball. And so Tennessee needs to get back to being a great high school, recruiting program. And I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Coming up next, we'll be joined by Sean Rourke from NHL.com. We'll get his thoughts on the Predators. We'll get his thoughts on potential playoff matchups that are out there, including, all of a sudden, the surging Edmonton Oilers that have creeped into the discussion as well. That's coming up next. Chase and Big Joe have your chance to qualify to win a pair of tickets in the Eurostone Club to see Jeff Dunham this Sunday at Bridgestone Arena. This contest brought to you by Green Trees Company, a family-owned cannabis company and dispensary providing high-quality legal THC products for anyone seeking medicine, relief, or wellness. Located in Hendersonville and a new location in West Nashville, and available online at greentreescompany.com. Tune in today between 9 and 11 on Chase and Big Joe for your chance to qualify and win. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Preds get a big win last night in a shootout against the New Jersey Devils. Their magic number to clinch a playoff berth down to 1 point. And the playoff picture is starting to come into the fold in the NHL. To help us talk more about that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in our buddy Sean Rourke from NHL.com. Sean, good morning, brother. How we doing?
Great, Robby. How are you? Long time no talk.
I know. It's good to have you back on the program here. I'm doing great. Appreciate you taking time to be with us. Sean, I'm curious from your perspective. So I flash back to February the 15th. The Predators got hammered by the Stars 9-2, and it looked like they were quickly kind of fading away in the playoff discussion, and we were talking about selling at the trade deadline around here. They go on a 16-0-2 run. They've got themselves now within 1 point of a playoff, of clinching a playoff berth. What's been just kind of your perspective, your view on watching the Predators with this turnaround, and I guess the quality of team you think they could be heading into the playoffs?
Yeah, it's been great to watch. I was on the bandwagon for the Predators from the beginning. I just thought that they had a good team, that they had underperformed. I think I might be the biggest UC Soros supporter in the world. I just think he's a fantastic goalie, and I think he gives them a confidence. Like, even when his numbers aren't great, like you watched that Devil game last night, and they had so many chances to blow that game open, at certain times, breakaways, odd man rushes, which is somewhat unusual to see lately from the Predators. But, he just took it all away and frustrated the Devils, who are easily frustrated at this point with the way that they've been struggling, and was able to steal a second point that was so valuable. And we all know when it comes to playoffs, goaltending is going to be huge. But so in seeing them go on that run, I had no idea they were that dominant a team or could be that dominant a team, but I knew they were better than the team you were talking about in February. And it's great to see them on the cusp of being back in the playoffs, because I personally think the playoffs are better with Nashville in it.
Sean, what do you think about the job Andrew Brunette has done this year and how they play now under him?
Fantastic. And I think, he should be one of the people that are considered for Coach of the Year. I think John Tortorella was in that conversation for a while. Unfortunately, the Flyers are sliding a little bit. Same thing with Carberry in Washington. He's done an unbelievable job without much in the cupboard there, but they've lost 6 in a row, and are starting to slide out of the picture. I think, Andrew, you look at what he's done in the past and the way that he preaches his team to play, to attack and be responsible as well. But it's not a conservative, it's not a Los Angeles Kings type of 1-3-1 attack where they're mostly concerned about defense and trying to grind out games. You'll see the Predators open up and create some offense and still be really responsible defensively. So to me, he's right at the top of that list of people that you'd consider for Coach of the Year.
Sean, there was a massive game last night between Dallas and Colorado. Dallas goes on the road. They get the 7-4 win, and it looks like they're going to be the ones that finish at the top of the Central Division. Obviously, a potential playoff matchup for the Predators as well. So how do you view the Stars, the depth that they have, especially at forward, and the quality of team that they could be come playoff time?
I think they're great, and it surprised me a little bit. I thought Colorado was going to be the team that came out of the Central. I really like what they have. They've struggled a bit lately, and looks like they're going to seed that and go into the 2-3 matchup with Winnipeg there. Dallas is a really dangerous team. Pete DeBoer is a really, really good coach. They have some players on their team that have been around for a long time and are hungry for the Stanley Cup. And then they, anytime you want to talk about being a playoff team and being good, you have to have some additions, right? And they've had some young players come in. Stankoven's come in and just been fantastic. They have Maverick Bork down in the AHL, who's been up and down and can certainly contribute. And much like the Predators, right? They have some elite defensemen that can just change a game. I mean, Miro Heiskanen, not quite as good as Roman Josi, but just a fantastic defenseman that pretty much decides how the game is going to be played, right? It's the pace that he wants to play it at. Slow or fast, he can do everything. So they're going to be a really tough out. And Ottinger is finally coming around. He's had a really subpar year compared to what he's done the first few years in the league. But he's kind of found his game at this point, and that makes them even more dangerous.
Yeah, so they're playing as well as anyone right now, Sean. And obviously last night is a statement. I still feel like, Colorado, I mean, you're talking about championship DNA and incredibly dangerous. You look at Edmonton and Vancouver. Vancouver's been a great story this year. Edmonton's, obviously, we know they're very dangerous. If you were a team in the West, and of course we have this discussion around here because we talk about it from the Preds perspective, but if you were a team in the West and you could rank those four teams in terms of who you would not want to play in the playoffs: Dallas, Colorado, Edmonton, Vancouver. How would you judge those teams in terms of who you would not want to see in a 7-game series?
Well, if we're doing it from who we don't want to see the most, I would put Colorado at the top, Dallas next, Vancouver after that, and then Edmonton. And I only say that about Edmonton because they don't have any kind of playoff pedigree, right? They for all the talent that they have, they haven't succeeded in the playoffs. And I'm still not sold on their goaltender. Stuart Skinner's been much better than he was early in the year. But I don't, if you're looking at goaltenders, to me, Saros is the cream of the crop in the West. And then, if Demko comes back and he's healthy and he's where he was at before, I'd put him in there. Ottinger's a little bit below that. And I think Skinner's below that, right? And I don't know what their psyche's like. I don't know what happens when they get in trouble, where with a lot of these other teams I do know, right? If Colorado gets in a little bit of trouble, it's not going to faze them. And Dallas is a veteran team. I don't think it's going to faze them. So, for all the offense that Edmonton can produce, I think they're an easier team to match up against, and I think they're easier to score against. And, if you could shut them down a little bit, it's going to cause them problems.
Well, Sean, kind of building on that, I mean, I would have to imagine, maybe outside of Toronto heading into the playoffs, because we know what a pressure cooker that place is. But Edmonton's going to have so much pressure on them to produce, to have this be the year to make a deep run in the playoffs. And look, they've got McDavid, they've got Draisaitl. Obviously, those two are as dangerous as it gets. But how much do you think that factors in this time of year, the pressure that comes with this run that Edmonton's about to embark on? Can they rise to the occasion? Can they not?
I think it's huge because the fan base isn't sold either, right? There's that cautious optimism, but there's also that pessimism, right? And you see it with Toronto. Every time something goes wrong, they're like, oh, here we go again. And that filters into the players. It's not a very conducive atmosphere to being successful. And I think it's that way for all four Canadian teams that are going to make the playoffs, all of whom have a chance to win, right? Winnipeg's a really good team, and Vancouver's a really good team. But no Canadian team has won in forever. It's been more than 30 years since the Canadians won the last Canadian Cup. So to me, it's a huge amount of pressure. They felt it in the past. They felt it last year against Vegas, right? I covered that series, and you could see it coming. They were so good at one point, and then, Game 4 came, and all of a sudden they kind of lost their mojo, and then Vegas was on to the next round, and you thought that series was going to be so different. So I think it's a huge part, and it comes down to depth, right? Again, when you want to be a really good playoff team, you have to have depth. The one thing that Edmonton's added, and I think is a little bit different, is Bouchard on the back line. He's a force for them right now. I think since the All-Star break, there's only 5 players, not 5 defensemen, 5 players that have scored more points than Bouchard. He's really come on with Coffey as his assistant coach, obviously a Hall of Fame defenseman himself, and Paul Coffey, and he's really helped him out and turned him into a much better player than he had been.
Who do you like right now? If you had to pick someone in the East, Sean, who do you view as the favorite on that side?
For a long time, it was the Florida Panthers. I thought they had everything, right? They a really good goaltender in Bobrovsky, a deep defense. Tkachuk leading that team. I think he just brings everybody into the fight. They were the class of the league for a while, not just the East, but they've fallen on hard times. Ekblad's hurt again. They've struggled a little bit. I don't know. Last year they were chasing it and they didn't get in until the last game and then went on a miracle run. Obviously this year they're in. They probably can't get the one spot after losing to Boston the other day. And I don't know if they've taken their foot off the gas a little bit, if they're dealing with some injuries, what it is. But I will tell you that whoever ends up playing them, and we just talked about Toronto, that could be the first round matchup. That's no reward at all. That's a really tough series because, kind of like the Predators and the Stars, they play playoff hockey all year. They are going to punish you. And they have exceptional talent. Reinhart has 50 goals. They're just a team that can do a little bit of everything. And Paul Maurice has seen everything. I covered him extensively through the playoffs last year, through that Eastern Conference final, 4 one-goal games, including a 4 overtime game, against the Carolina Hurricanes. And he never wavered. And then he got to the final, and the same thing. That team was outclassed by the Vegas Golden Knights, mainly because they were so injured. Their injury list when the season was over was sobering. But Paul Maurice never wavered. He never got excited. He never got down. He's the perfect guy to coach that team. And it's amazing because he's still a young man, and he's been coaching forever. He started coaching when he was 28 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what I was going to do when I was 28 years old.
Sean, last thing for you. In the Norris Trophy conversation, I feel like it's probably Quinn Hughes' award to lose at this point, but you have Yossi making kind of the late season push. Obviously, Cale Makar has been in the discussion all year long. There's Hedman in Tampa Bay. I mean, there's a lot of different defensemen that you could include in the discussion, but kind of how do you view the Norris Trophy race right now?
Well, the way I see it, I think you're right. I think Quinn Hughes is going to win it just because of the numbers, and he's much better defensively than he's been. He really kind of put an emphasis on that. And I think when you have the puck all the time, you don't really have to worry about defense. But when he's been put in defensive situations, he's been better than he had been in the past. I think, I'll be honest with you, at the midway point of the season, Roman Yossi wasn't on my ballot.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was good enough. The second half of the year that he's had is amazing. He will be. I don't have a ballot with the PHWA. We do our own trophy trackers. We'll do them next week. Everybody on our staff votes on them, and then we kind of compile them and try and give the readers a sense of what might happen. We do them every quarter. And Roman will be on my ballot. I don't know whether he's second or third. I really like what Cale Makar does for Colorado. He's another guy that just drives the game, and it is just fantastic. But the second half of the year that Yossi's had has been unbelievable, and he did it again last night when they needed him the most. He was the guy that was there and kind of drove the whole thing as they came back into that game and were able to eke out that second point that they desperately needed.
Well, Sean, it's great to talk to you, brother. Appreciate so much you taking time to be with us this morning, and playoffs right around the corner. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, I'm actually hoping I'll be in Nashville if everything sorts itself out right for at least a couple of games. So fingers crossed we'll see you all in person and enjoy a little bit of the Nashville nightlife there.
Absolutely, as we have been known to do that. Sean Rourke from NHL.com, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your thoughts. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Coming up next, it's time for the Rob Rant here on Robby and Rexrode. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hey, Robbie Stanley here. Tonight, the bittersweet end of the tourney, but FanDuel lets you make it a little bit sweeter. Whether you're betting on the favorite or the underdog, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It's UConn, it's Purdue, a titanic matchup coming up tonight. I'm going to take Purdue plus the points. I'm going to take Purdue to win outright. I know everybody's going to be picking UConn, but I've been on the Purdue train the whole time. I'm going to stick with it at this point. You can take it any way you want to take it. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, or anything else that catches your eye. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/Rob and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
Don't make me angry.
Sometimes you have to tell someone to pound sand.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
This is the Rob Rant. Now on Robby and Rexrode.
They just plain sucked. I've seen teams suck before, but they were the suckiest bunch of sucks that ever sucked.
Homer, watch your mouth.
I gotta go. My damn wiener kids are listening.
I bet you the other team has people who believe in God too. So why did God want your team to win? That's all. If you just take that out, then I think we're good. God doesn't care about the outcome of the game, and that's it. And that's all I have to say.
It is that time of the day, time for the Rob Rant here on Robby and Rexrode. You can check it out every morning, either the Rob Rant or the Rex Rant. Joe, I'm resisting the temptation to do a rant every day this week and just talk about the Masters the whole time. It is Masters week. We know how much you love golf, so I am resisting the temptation to break down each member of the Masters playing this week.
Well, go for it, man.
I'm sure people would
I'm
love
not
it.
opposed.
Sure people would love that. Rexrode could get in a nice 15-minute nap every day if that's what I did.
That's what I was just going to say, actually. Hey, I don't know. I mean, are people get excited about the Masters, right?
Of course. Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll get you a pimento cheese sandwich. A lot of things going on down there.
Yeah. Pimento, you mean?
Yeah, what'd I say?
I thought you just said Primanti.
No, not Primanti. Pimento. I think I just said it really fast, like pimenta.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No
All right,
problem.
so my rant today is just kind of in general, but a situation happened on Saturday night. You know, I'm on dad duty Saturday night, just kind of moseying around, doing some things around the house. And the Predators are in this battle with the New York Islanders, and they put over 90 shot attempts on goal. They can't get anything done. They can't get anything past Semyon Varlamov. They lose the game, and at that point, they had lost 4 of their last 5. And people on Twitter, they freak out. I was just casually checking my mentions because I didn't really even tweet for most of that game, I don't think, but just casually checking it out. And I looked down, and some user on there that I had never seen before was tweeting me about how the Predators should not have wasted their time, was the phrase that was used, going on a 16-0-2 run, should have missed the playoffs. That way they could have had a better draft pick heading into this next offseason. And I read it. I shook my head. I went about doing my business, went back to go respond to it, and the person had deleted it. So it was no longer in my mentions, which gave me a little bit of hope that maybe they came to their senses. It was an emotional moment after the loss, and they just deleted it after that. But it got me thinking about, like, we've talked about this with the Predators. We talked about this with the Titans as well. I remember we had PK in, and he went on a big rant about this too. When have we gotten, as a sports-consuming society, Joe Rexrode, to the place where we are so concerned about the draft or the offseason that we can no longer enjoy watching the sports teams play the sports in the season? I'm not saying that there's never a place for the discussion of, hey, would the best option here be to maybe lose and get higher up in the draft? But, that discussion, the time for that, Joe, is not early April when you've gone on a run or going to make the playoffs. And if you did miss the playoffs, it would be probably by a game where your draft positioning would be, hey, instead of the 20th overall pick or the 17th or 18th overall pick, you get the 13th or 14th overall pick. Congratulations. Way to go, Nashville Predators. We are so much today, and this is not just a Predators thing. It's not just a Titans thing. It's a sports society in general thing. If you don't have like the best record in the league and are consistently competing for the best record in the West, or in the NFL's case, the top seed in the AFC, everybody thinks that it's time to tank and it's time to go find the next big thing and tank. And we've seen countless examples where that has not worked. We have seen when we've made it to this point in April where we enjoy watching the sports team. The Predators are going to make the playoffs. I understand they got shut out against the Islanders. They put up over 90 shot attempts. The goaltender played great. If you want to have discussions about the long-term plan for the Predators and would it be better for them to get worse before getting better after a while, you can have those discussions. We've had them. I think those discussions are probably better served in the offseason, in like June, in July, when you're making personnel decisions, not after they've gone on a 16-0-2 run, played the most fun hockey they've played in 5 years, and are going to make the playoffs. So just calm down, people. Let's enjoy the sports that are happening right in front of us. That's my rant.
Yeah, it's a great question because, first of all, yeah, there's a couple parts of it, which one we've talked about, which is just the, like why can't you enjoy what's happening in the moment, right? And it's the fact that, like, tanking, there's no one really tanks. I mean, who actually tanks? Like, there have been owners who've tried to tank. We've seen it, I guess, in some leagues. But, like a year-long tank, I guess, like the Blackhawks, right, for Bedard or whatever, that's management. That's from above, like, okay, this team's going to stink this year, and there's a strategy to it. But teams that are like, once a team gets put together, how do you expect coaches and players to not be competitive? One. But then two, I do think that we have become way more of a draft/recruiting sports world. Agreed. Where that stuff is so important. And obviously the NFL draft is stands above all of it. Like, we seriously, I think, maybe talk as much about, it feels like, I know it feels like it in April, but like, we talk so much about NFL draft prospects during the course of a year. It's insane. And recruiting is, the recruiting championships. I mean, that's become a thing. Now, it's funny because signing day is kind of changed now, with the way the calendar has gone, but that became this huge sports calendar day for so many years, February, whatever, the first Tuesday in February. So some of it is like everybody wants to know what's next and everything. But yeah, like, is it to the point where, like, either you're the Chiefs, or the Nuggets or whatever, or it's just like, it's just not good enough. Let's go to the draft.
Well, and the other part of this is the
sometimes.
timing too, right? Like it's one thing to complain about that at the beginning of the year.
Right.
It's April. I mean, the playoffs are 2 weeks from now. I mean, they're going to make it. So, we're long past the tanking part of it and missing the playoffs. I'm sorry, but the difference between the 17th overall pick and the 13th overall pick, I don't really care about, Joe. It's just one of those things that it is what it is.
I mean, it really means nothing. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, this does speak to the bigger questions that about sports. It is very annoying, but also that particular sentiment was especially dumb. I mean, wasted their time.
Yeah, wasted time.
Going on like the greatest run in franchise history, a point streak, which gives a team that wasn't supposed to make the playoffs a playoff bid. I mean, it's a big waste of time. Tell those guys they're wasting their time.
I'm just glad they deleted it. That tells me that there was probably some emotional suffering that was going on, and then they went back and after the game and decided that they were better than that tweet. I respect it.
Yeah, and that's fine. But also, that did cross your mind, and also then you typed it and put it in public.
And then hit send.
I mean, the delete is there's some forgiveness for the delete.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Corey Curtis. We are less than 3 weeks away from the NFL draft. We'll get Corey's thoughts on the latest with the Tennessee Titans. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. And as we do every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in our friend Corey Curtis from News 2, brought to you by Tennessee Men's Clinic. Corey, good morning. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. I watched the young Ava Martinez Curtis pop in 3 goals yesterday.
Oh.
So first career hat trick. It was a huge weekend at our house.
That's a big weekend. That's a ground.
Nice.
Is that coaching from you? Who do we give credit to?
No, yeah, my coaching career ended. She is now plays for one of the local clubs.
So no credit to you whatsoever.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, all right. I'm just throwing it out there.
I'm the Will Ferrell of soccer coaching.
Oh, good. Great
I
movie.
just sit on the sideline and drink coffee. That's
right.
it.
That's right. So, Corey, the Titans hosting a couple different visits today.
Yeah.
But let's start with the J.C. Latham part of this. He played right tackle at Alabama. Obviously, physically, there's a ton of ability there. He's very gifted. We'll see what that means in the NFL in terms of can he play the left? Is he going to stay on the right? If it is a right tackle, and that's where he's best suited in the NFL, would you have a problem if that's the route the Titans win at number 7 with J.C. Latham?
Well, a little bit, because you still haven't solved your left tackle, and your left tackle is going to cost you money at some point. And we ran into this problem a few years ago. If you remember, we watched as the Titans had Jack Conklin, and they didn't want to pay him, I think it was $14 million, because he was a right tackle and not a left tackle. Well, then you shouldn't have drafted him 11th overall or 9th or wherever they picked him.
8th overall, yeah.
8th, yeah. So that's traded up from 11 to 8. That's the issue that I have is financially, you still need that left tackle, and now you're going to put yourself in a bind when it comes to retaining this guy in 4 or 5 years. And so, that would be my only issue with it is, figuring out the financials and then still having a gaping hole on that side, which you seemingly have no answer for. I mean, if you're not going to get him in the first round, I guess you could go tackle. You could. I mean, look, they did it in 2004 when they went in the second and the fourth with Ruse and Stewart, and that worked out pretty well. So you could go Latham and say Patrick Paul from Houston, and just you got your left in the second and your right in the first. It wouldn't look awful. I think we can say that.
Yeah, it's funny. I think think about that move, like the Conklin, like go back and think of all the mishaps that happened out of that. Had they just paid Conklin what he wanted and kept him, and I know he's been hurt in Cleveland too, but yeah, they gave him an offer, but they lowballed him. But yeah, imagine all of the mishaps that would not have happened after that, and then what would have happened from there. That's kind of a fascinating thing to think about. On the visit front too, Corey. Like Malik Neighbors is like Titans everything, with him. I mean, and he's one of their visits, and they did the interview and all this stuff. And it does feel like, he's a guy who could be there for them, but I don't know. Do you read anything into that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I do. They only have 30 of them, right? So they're not going to waste one on a guy that they're not interested in. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear they're taking a good, strong look at him. And, it goes back to that whole Brian Callahan thing of saying if all things are equal, he's going to want the guy, who scores touchdowns. And I get it, and I love Malik Neighbors, so don't get me wrong. So if they took him, I wouldn't be like, oh, man, they blew it. You don't get worse by getting good football players. I will continue to say that. But I don't think all things are equal, all right? They're in much better shape in the wide receiver room than they are at the tackle room. I understand that they're older at the wide receiver room, and that's another reason why I wouldn't get all bent out of shape if they took him. And also, if you think he is Justin Jefferson, if you think he is Jamar Chase, then you take that guy, all right? And so we have to wait and see on that. But no, I don't look into this and say, well, they're just giving him a visit, because to me, I take top 30s pretty seriously.
Well, so I think a lot of Titans fans, Corey, have dismissed the idea that they're going receiver now that they've signed Ridley, right? I mean, they've got Ridley, they've got Hopkins. We all know they need a left tackle, so they're going to have to get a left tackle at some point. But I mean, I'm not opposed to it. Like if Neighbors is there or a Dunze, whoever, and you think that they're better than a Joe Alt or a J.C. Latham, I'm cool with you going wide receiver at that point. Like, to me, those guys don't come around very often. If you have a chance to get them and you think they're that good, go get them.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I say, you don't get worse by taking, good football players. If you had a better running back at 7 that you loved, I wouldn't be upset about it. If you had a better, cornerback at 7, I mean, the whole idea is with the draft is to get better players. Okay. And so, I always go back to, there were 20 whatever teams that passed on Aaron Rodgers because they had a quarterback. There were how many teams that passed on Adrian Peterson because they had a running back? The idea isn't just to fill holes on your team, but yes, that is part of it, but it's to get better players. And when you get a chance at generational players or just all Pro Bowl caliber players, you've got to take those chances because, as we've seen, there have been years at a time where the Titans haven't had very many of those. And, when you've got those guys, they make a difference. And so if you've got a chance at a all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber receiver, and you're not going to take it, I mean, that would seem to be foolish unless you think, Joe Alt is an all-pro caliber tackle that you could lock down for 10 years. That remains to be seen. The other thing, I guess I should have brought up with Latham is if they want him, doesn't that indicate a real possibility of trading down?
I mean, so.
You could go back. Because if you're good with Alt or Latham or, Ola, then you're like, okay, we're good with any of these guys. You could go back to 11 or 13. Or, I mean, maybe the Bears want to trade up from 9 to get one of them. And you're like, okay, you take whichever one you want. We'll take one of the other ones. So it'll be interesting to see, if the Latham thing is because they're willing to go back.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I would think that if there's a partner, then that could be ideal for them to get more picks. Corey, I do need to get your shock level on John Calipari to Arkansas.
I'm not shocked that he's leaving, but leaving for Arkansas, yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is. I just don't see. I don't see it as I just don't see him there. All right. I mean, and maybe because I'm just used to seeing him at Kentucky. And maybe because he's a Northeast guy going to Arkansas, that just seems a little weird.
Calling the Hogs.
Yeah. But, look, he's a great coach and he's a great recruiter, but the results have not lived up to it at Kentucky. Samaria and I had a long talk last night about, how at some schools good is not good enough. It's just like for the Lady Vols. Kelly Harper did a good job, but that is not good enough for the Lady Vols. And so I think after he survived that opening shock of the latest first-round gaffe, I thought, well, it looks like he's going to stay. So I was pretty surprised last night, and then pretty surprised to see him married to another team. But, Joe, you know this, and Robbie, you know this too. Don't let me exclude you.
Please don't.
When coaches leave like this, they are quite often encouraged to, or let be known that their home wouldn't be upset if they left.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Corey, last thing for you. Preds are 1 point away from clinching a playoff berth for the 9th time in the last 10 years. What do you make of the way they're playing right now? And if they're able to get this done, how big of an accomplishment is that for this group, given expectations heading into the year?
Well, they're not on the heater that they were on. That's clear. I still think they probably need to get their legs underneath them a little bit more. I have to think that they ran out of gas a little bit, no matter what anybody says. But I think yesterday was a good game from the aspect of that's the kind of game good teams win. That they find a way to scratch and claw and get that W, and that is what they did. That shot by Evangelista was a heck of a shot. Yep. I mean, he got that puck out in front of him and saw he had about a 4-inch window over the goalie's shoulder and just tucked it in there. That was a heck of a shot by that kid. And then, Saros, outside of giving up his first shot of the game, Saros was Saros, and you could say he's the reason they won that game. And then the shootout, that gets it done. So, they just got to get across the finish line. I don't know if they're going to get across as the first or the second wild card at this point. They're going to have to play better if they want to hold on to that top spot, because I believe Vegas has 2 games in hand.
Correct.
And so I won't be surprised if they're 8th, but I don't really care, because whether they're playing Edmonton or Colorado or Winnipeg or whoever, Dallas, to me those teams are all, 1 ABC. And you're going to have to play well to beat one. I would be much more concerned about them playing well and being a little more rested when they got there than whatever the matchup is.
Corey, great stuff, as you know, always. Congratulations to Ava on the hat trick.
It was amazing, and your time is coming. So you might want to start looking up YouTube and starting some soccer practices.
Yeah.
That's where I learned to do it. So
little cone drills left and right. We can do that.
Yeah, they got to get older for the cone drills. At some point, they just got to point them in the direction and tell them to run there.
Run, go that way. That's right.
Kick the ball.
Yeah. No, you got to turn around. The parking lot's there. You got to turn around.
Awesome stuff. Corey, thank you, sir. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, you guys have a great week.
You as well. Corey Curtis from News 2, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Brought to you by Tennessee Men's Clinic. We'll take your thoughts on what Corey had to say, the NFL draft, John Calipari to Arkansas. We'll get more into that coming up next as well. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic will join us at 8:30. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Check out Nashville's best deal of the week this week. It's Burger Republic. Burger Republic, locally owned with locations in Murfreesboro, Mount Juliet, The Gulch, and Lenox Village. They serve up premium burgers, beers, and hand-spun milkshakes. Get half off a $50 gift card to Burger Republic at thegamenashville.com/deals while supplies last. Just went, by the way, back into our new kitchen, Joe, brought to you by Eurostone. They did a fine job with the countertops, the cabinets. Eurostone hooking us up. Looks really good in the kitchen, Joe.
Very, very good. Very nice. Love it. Yes. And then Keyser's Keurig looks really nice on top of it.
It really does.
Doesn't it? It does.
I mean, he even cleaned it for you last week. What a guy,
he did.
Nick Keyser.
I sure did. But this morning, Joe, I'll have you know that I actually did my own pour-over at home before I left.
Wow, look at you. Growing up.
Okay.
Growing up right in front of our very eyes.
It's a lot stronger and tastes better.
That's good. That's good. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in, Kyle. Kyle, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, guys. Well, I've got two things. I'll go ahead and start with what Corey is saying. I really like the J.C. Latham draft pick if we trade back. That's the case for me because right tackle is just not as important as left. But if he's that good, remember Ronnie Stanley with Baltimore was drafted and played right tackle at 5th overall and then moved to left eventually. So I'm in. If they think he's that good of a player and that caliber, let's do it. But I'm a perfect example of I like the draft more than the Super Bowl, not more than the playoffs for some reason, but I can't get enough of it. It's you get a chance to be creative, build your team instead of just, sit back and watching the competition. But it's just the creativity, I guess, of it. I just want to let y'all know about that.
Yep. Thanks for the call, Kyle. Kyle in direct opposition to my rant earlier.
No, but it's not really in direct opposition. I mean, I love the draft too. Like the draft is fascinating, and they've done a great job of making it a great TV event, and just the breaking down of all these guys to the granular level it's done is, I mean, it's its own industry. I follow it. We're gonna have Bruce Feldman on next, and he's gonna talk about his, he does this mock draft, but he does it with with college coaches speaking on all these prospects, and it's really fascinating to hear stuff like that. So I don't think, and you know what? Even if you love it more than the Super Bowl, okay. I mean, I guess I could get that. I prefer a football game to people putting on a hat and walking across the stage. But I mean, I'm not even. I think it's more just like worried about your team getting a little bit different middling pick.
Yes, for sure.
As opposed to like, wow, your team's actually having a surprisingly good year. You should enjoy your team, right? That's what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And look, we all love the draft, right? I mean, that's why the draft is as popular as it is. To me, there is a difference. Like, to me, the NFL draft is much different than the NHL draft too. Like, look, I'm as big of an NHL guy as anybody, but for the most part, outside of your McDavids and your Bedards and guys like that, the NHL draft doesn't really affect your team until about 2 or 3 years down the road when you make the pick. That is not the case in the NFL. I mean, it's immediate. So there's a big difference that way too.
That's a great point. Right. I mean, yeah, the very, very top shelf guy in the NHL, few guys. MLB, you'll have a little bit of that. But yeah, in football and basketball, it's more immediate. And honestly, I mean, you look at the NBA draft, I mean, like, the impact, obviously, a Wemby or somebody like that, but there's a lot. Go through the first round. A lot of guys who don't come out and really make that much impact once you get to the second half of the first round. Whereas in the NFL, there's such a churn of talent that you're going to have a very good chance of starters into the third and fourth round.
Yep, no question about that. Joe, quickly, your thoughts before we get to Bruce Feldman on John Calipari going from Kentucky to Arkansas, expected to be announced later today, I guess officially, but a 5-year deal for John Calipari going to Arkansas to be the next head coach of the Razorbacks. His time at Kentucky is over, and he's staying in the SEC.
I think some Kentucky fans, someone has already yelled at us in the text line, like, "What? Don't say Kentucky fans are happy." I still feel confident in saying more are than not. I believe that. And I think it's probably, even for Kentucky's administration, which pretty clearly considered moving on from him at the end of this year, it kind of makes it easy on them too, right? I mean, now they can move on and go try to get their next long-term coach. And it'll be interesting. Now I'm trying to think of similar situations here where such a high-profile, successful coach goes to a league rival in college sports, and I'm sure I'm not thinking of something, but I guess like Saban, LSU, but he went to the NFL, then came back to Alabama. I'm sure there are some. I'm sure there's some examples, but nothing comes like at that level of the league. Because look, Arkansas, let's remember, Musselman got them to the Elite Eight. The expectations there are very high. I mean, Nolan Richardson, 40 Minutes of Hell, and that program, what it was, that was as much a flagship program of the SEC. Really, in the mid-'90s, it was the flagship program of the SEC. It was brand new in the SEC, but it was the best program. It was a better program than Kentucky, and they have a tremendous history. So the expectations are going to be high there. And I'm very interested by the Arkansas fans' perspective on this. Like David Ubben, we talked about his tweet earlier, like, this isn't necessarily a parade. It's a big move, and there's got to be some excitement, but there's also got to be some question about Calipari at this point in his career when you failed at the most important part of your job several years in a row.
Yeah.
That's why things like this happen.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I'm interested to see not only the job that he does there, how he builds the roster, can he get that team to have more tournament success, certainly than he's had in the latter part of his run at Kentucky, but also where does Kentucky go from here, right? Like, is Nate Oates going to be the call? Is Bruce Pearl under consideration? Do they try to go with some young up-and-comer, which I think I'd probably be surprised by, but like the Kentucky coaching search part of this is going to be really interesting. Like, if you're Nate Oates, you leaving Alabama to go to Kentucky? I mean, I think conventional wisdom would probably tell you you'd heavily consider it, but the Kentucky coaching search that is now underway, going to be really fascinating to see how that part of it shakes out as well. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Bruce Feldman from The Athletic. We'll continue to break down the NFL draft with him, including a really interesting piece he put together at The Athletic, getting college coaches' opinions on some of the draft prospects that we've talked a lot about. We'll get into that with Bruce coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you on this Monday morning. Taking your thoughts, 615-737-1025. We're going through the NFL draft. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic has put together a really, really interesting piece at theathletic.com. But to help us talk more about that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome Bruce into the program. Bruce, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning, guys.
Really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. So, Bruce, you've put together a piece at The Athletic speaking to dozens of college football coaches, NFL sources, and have kind of gotten their perspective on some of the prospects that we've talked a lot about in this draft process. I'm curious, from your perspective, putting this together, how much of an added look, an added perspective does that give you when breaking down these draft prospects?
Well, I think it's just gives you such a different perspective because you hear a lot of people who say, I studied the film and I watched all the reps. But the guys I'm talking to for this are the ones who scouted them, game planned for them, and then actually faced them. So they knew exactly what they were trying to do to them, how to deal with them, all those things, which is, I think, a unique perspective. So you get a really good window into what they think. And a lot of these guys have played them multiple years because it's guys usually from the same conference. They have a perspective, having I was like, who do I trust the most? And I'll give you their perspective on things. And I go back to last year, the guy who was the most effusive on CJ Stroud is actually one who raves about Michael Penix's arm talent and can talk to you and walk you through some of the things that their game plan was, but also what they learned and everything else. And I think those are the guys I put the most stock in because they have real hands-on experience when it comes to these players.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I love this. There are a lot of mock drafts. We have a lot of great mock drafts at the Athletic, but I love this one. This is hopefully an annual tradition, like Bruce's, the Freaks list, which Bruce has been doing for a long time. We're going back to SI, right, Bruce?
We're going back way before that, even to my ESPN.com days. It's now 20 years, so it's crazy that it's gone on this long. But yeah.
ESPN, right. Now, of course, if we did a media freaks list, Bruce would be on that, by the way. and I appreciate you being up at 6:30 to do this in LA, by the way, Bruce. But I love this mock draft. And one thing that stands out to me as it relates to what we discuss here is the Joe Alt situation with the Titans and sort of the question of, the Titans could trade back. There are a lot of tackles. It's a deep tackle draft. But is there a gap? Is it Joe Alt gap, everybody, or not? And, I mean, based on your draft and the commentary, I feel like you came away. It looks like there is a gap, at least in the minds of some who have faced him compared to other tackles in college football.
There is. From everything I've gathered, they feel like there is a gap with Joe Alt. Joe Alt checks the most boxes. There's other guys who maybe have bigger weak spots or areas where they have to develop further on either one aspect as a pass protector, as a run blocker, or maybe they're, it's hard to you have a guy like Amarius Mims from Georgia who's this, both Alt is obviously a giant of a man as well, but Mims is an enormous guy, but he's only really started 7 games. And I think you're projecting a lot. People like what they see talent wise, but there's been a couple of guys I talked to also faced other guys who were projected in the first round. And when I would ask them about other guys after talking about Joe Alt, they'd be like, are people talking about, blank as a top 15 pick or something? And I was like, well, there's chatter that this guy's going to be a first round pick. He's like, oh, he's a good player. He ain't Joe Alt though. And I think that's why, be careful if you trade back. And again, obviously the Titans are going to do their interviews and they're going to study everything that they feel like how it fits. But from everything I've heard, there seems like there is a gap right now in terms of how ready this guy is, what you're getting. Doesn't mean 3 years down the road, 2 years down the road, somebody else can't, blossom into a top 10 caliber talent. But right now, from everything I've heard, Joe Alt is clearly that guy.
Bruce Feldman with us here on Robby and Rexrode. So, Bruce, obviously there's been a lot of talk about the top three receivers in this draft, Neighbors, Harrison, and Odunze. And, based on the commentary around all those guys, have a chance to be special at the NFL level. How do you view those three in terms of how they stack up against each other? Do you think there's clear separation from 1 to 3? Do you think they're all pretty much right there together? Like, how do you view those three guys that are presumably going to be the top 3 receivers taken in the draft?
I used to think there was clear separation. And then this year happened, and I think Rome Odunze really closed the gap. And obviously, Malik Neighbors put up an insane season as well. I think they're all a little different. I mean, none of them are small. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Odunze are bigger than Neighbors, but Neighbors is the most explosive of the three, and he's the one who's the scariest with the ball in his hands. I think Odunze has the best ball skills and the best ability to track it, whereas Harrison is the most polished. I expect all three to become big stars. I really do. I used to say that I thought Harrison was the closest thing to a sure thing in this draft. I think Odunze is right there with him, from knowing guys who've been around him, who've seen him and evaluated, been up close with him around the draft process. And then also, obviously, the coaches I talked to who just kind of can't stop raving about his ball skills and his competitiveness, and it was next level stuff. So I think this is a great draft for receivers. I think there's other guys, like watch out for Brian Thomas. I feel like he gets, I don't say he's under the radar because a lot of people think he's I think he's a top 15 pick, but he's a guy, another one who really impressed people how football smart he is. And I think they just thought he was a big red zone guy, and there's way more to him than that. This is a draft where I think you will see high level talent way beyond the first three guys.
So Bruce, Jim Harbaugh heads out to the Chargers, and he makes a comment about JJ McCarthy should be the number 1 pick. It's like, oh, that's nice, Jim. That's very nice to support your guy. Then we get all this buzz about McCarthy, and I'm like, gosh, is this all Harbaugh out here? But it's not all Harbaugh out here. Obviously, there's real buzz about McCarthy, and I've always thought he was a very talented guy. I think people who put too much into how Michigan plays, I think that's a mistake. But it seems like this is real, right? You feel like this is real, that he could move up into that upper echelon of the draft. And first of all, how real do you think that is, and what do you think of him?
I think he's like what you just said. I think he's really, really talented. He's very, very athletic. He throws well. He throws exceptionally well on the run. There's a lot of stuff you see where the play breaks down, and he does make some spectacular plays. And you just watch him. I think the other thing that's big for him is there was all sorts of turbulence around Michigan this year with everything going on with Jim Harbaugh. And he was the leader of this team, kept everything on track. And everything I know from people inside the program talk about how football smart he is and his leadership skills and his demeanor. And he kept everything on track. He wasn't worried about what my stats are like. I know from talking to other coaches who are like, usually a guy like this, and when I say like this, I mean the face of a program, a first round talent quarterback. It's like, oh, they want to be promoted to be the Heisman guy or worry about their stats a little. That wasn't him at all. It wouldn't at all surprise me if he went ahead of Drake May, because I think there's a little bit, just from the people I've talked to, in some corners there's a little bit of Drake May is polarizing too. A lot of these guys are for one reason or another, and I think that's some of it's that draft process where they get picked apart, and it's over analysis. Maybe it's not over analysis, but you just get a lot of different voices, seeing different things. But I think if you told people maybe outside of the actual coaches who see them and study them and game plan for them, that JJ McCarthy might potentially go ahead of Drake May in the draft, I think that would have shocked people, at least in in the outside draft world. I don't know if it would shock people now. I think it might surprise people still a little bit because it's, its beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I don't think it would shock a lot of people based on the people who've studied them and some of the hesitation maybe on one guy and some of the buy-in on another.
Well, Bruce, really interesting stuff. Appreciate so much you taking time to be with us this morning, and we've almost made it to the draft. Enjoy the next couple of weeks here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Same here. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Bruce Feldman from The Athletic, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll take your thoughts on what Feldman had to say. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Final thoughts to wrap up the show. The Preds 1 point away from a playoff spot. John Calipari is on the move to Arkansas. The national title game coming up tonight between Purdue and UConn. We'll get to all of it next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game.
Well, folks, if you're like me, your bracket is long since busted. But it doesn't matter because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of this tournament. There's one left. It's Purdue UConn tonight. And, all tournament long, you've had big upsets you could bet on. You've had 1 seeds. Well, we got 2 1 seeds playing here for the national championship. New customers for FanDuel Sportsbook get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. If you want to talk about this game, remember, that's $200 used on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. And right now, this is it. UConn, Purdue. My bracket's bad, but I did pick Purdue to win it all, and I'm going to stick with Purdue and take the points on that tonight. Do whatever you like. You can also do a parlay. Just visit FanDuel.com/Joe102 and bet on college hoops all the way until tonight when they cut down the nets. You must be 21 or older, present Tennessee. First online real money wager, only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issue is now withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms sports at FanDuel.com. Gambling problem, call the Tennessee Red Line 800-889-9789.
Welcome back in. Final segment of the day. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls. Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. I got some tickets to give away. A 4-pack of tickets to the Monster Energy Supercross Championship coming up at Nissan Stadium on Saturday, April 20th. Be caller 3, 615-737-1025. 615-737-1025. Caller 3 will win a 4-pack of tickets to the Monster Energy Supercross Championship at Nissan Stadium on Saturday, April the 20th. Joe, the Preds 1 point out of officially clinching a playoff berth for the 9th time in the last 10 years. They get the win yesterday in a shootout against the Devils. Almost clinched last night. St. Louis went to a shootout against the Ducks. They were able to win the shootout, but now just either 1 point gained by you, 1 point lost by the Blues, and you're in the playoffs. So an opportunity on Tuesday, Joe, with a win or just getting the game to overtime for you to clinch at home Tuesday night against Winnipeg.
Yeah, embrace the opportunity and win that game. That's a team you're not going to have to face in the postseason unless there's some advancing going on. But it's a playoff team, so it's a measuring stick game, and it's a rival. And to win that game and earn your way in and not just count on the Blues completely falling apart. I mean, the Blues are, they're basically – I mean, good for them to find a way, I guess, last night against the Ducks. But, it's academic. It's over. But why not have fun and be able to do it yourself in front of your home fans on Tuesday night? That seems like a pretty good outcome. And, the Preds got a split this weekend. Clutch win and clutch comeback and win last night. Clutch goal by Evangelista. Didn't work out so well against great goaltending Saturday, but overall, I'd say things are looking pretty good for this team.
Well, playoff pictures start to shape up, too. Dallas gets a win last night against Colorado, so it's looking like Dallas at 107 points is going to finish in first place in the division. Colorado looks like they're going to settle into the 2-3 matchup against Winnipeg. And the Predators right now kind of jockeying back and forth between Wild Card 1 and Wild Card 2. They got passed by the Kings over the weekend. Originally, the Kings are now in third place in the Pacific. Preds are up 2 points on Vegas. Vegas has 2 games in hand on the Predators, and a big one tonight between Vancouver and Vegas. From the standpoint of Vegas is right behind you, and Vancouver is trying to hold off Edmonton. So a potential first-round opponent in Edmonton could be creeping up for the Predators as well. So big things to pay attention to over the next couple of days here in the NHL. Joe, the national title game tonight between Purdue and UConn. What do we make of that matchup and the chances that Purdue can hang in there and have a chance to win in a game against a team like UConn that has been just an absolute juggernaut all season and all tournament long?
Yeah, I picked Purdue at the beginning of the year to win it all, and I thought they were going to pull up Virginia. Virginia of 5 years ago, and right now they've done everything to pull the Virginia. I don't know that I feel great about that pick just because of UConn and how good they've been, but I think they can do it. I think Purdue can do it. It really comes down to Zach Edey needs to score on Donovan Clingan to the point that UConn has to help, like almost basically every other team that Purdue has played, I mean, basically every other team they've played have realized, no, you can't just single him up. He's just going to plant himself a foot from the basket, and he's going to go nuts. So if Clingan can actually keep him out and make him take tough shots over him, then I think UConn could win this going away. But it's about Edey. Can Edey force them to help? And then, you get the ball rotating and get some open threes. Best three-point shooting team in the country against the best team in the country, which is definitely UConn.
I'm interested to see what happens tonight. I'm going to try my best, Joe, to ignore the fact that it's starting at 8:20 Central Time and not be a total pawpaw and watch the game tonight.
Yeah, it really is weird that they've never changed that, never come off that. I don't understand it. Now that we were talking about earlier, I got to go out and find that, like, someone has written a story or asked some people, like, why do they still insist on 9:20 Eastern for this thing. I mean, obviously, whenever you think of things, you think of Pacific. So okay, so it's 6:20. So I guess people are home from work at that point. But okay, 5:20 Pacific. Why is that bad? Then kids in our time zone, in the Eastern time zone, can actually stay up for the whole game.
It makes no sense to me, especially I realize there's no way to predetermine this before making the schedule, but their audience tonight is mainly going to be in the East Coast and in the Central time zone. So we'll see what that looks like when it comes to the game tonight. I hope it's a good one. And look, I think these have pretty clearly been the two best teams all year. So I'm hoping for a good national title game tonight. We'll see if Purdue can hang in there, and UConn going for back-to-back titles here on that front. Lots of thoughts throughout the entire show today, Joe, on the Calipari from Kentucky to Arkansas part of this. We've heard from Kentucky fans that are very excited that he's gone. We've heard from some Kentucky fans that are, I guess, disappointed that it ended the way that it did. The most intriguing part to me now, beyond the obvious of how he's going to do in Arkansas, is where does Kentucky go from here? Is Nate Oates a part of that discussion? Is it going to be Bruce Pearl? A lot of people asking about Bruce Pearl on the text line right now. I'm interested to see where Kentucky now pivots to with Calipari out and to Arkansas.
Yeah, Oates, Pearl, those are realistic possibilities. Hurley probably not. Jay Wright, I really don't think is. Mark Few, I don't either. But I think they're going to take a big swing for sure. Now, Kentucky fan, at least one got after me saying Arkansas was a better program in the 90s. Let's say early 90s, because Oliver Miller, Mayberry, all into those championship teams, and Kentucky was in terrible probation. Once it got to the mid-90s, Kentucky got back to being a dominant program. But Arkansas has a great tradition, and so there's still pressure on Calipari to get them back to the Final Four. And yes, this Kentucky hire is going to be fascinating. All this started because SMU stupidly fired Rob Lanier.
I've got a call to action, Joe, for DJ Burnside. I really need a preemptive strike, a preemptive John Calipari calling the Hogs Photoshop of some kind that we can really sink our teeth into. I'm so excited. If he doesn't call the Hogs at either his introductory press conference or at some point coming up in football season, I'm going to be very upset. We need a John Calipari woo pig suey like nobody's business.
Oh, he'll do it, right? I think he'll do it.
I hope so.
I would have no faith in him having a chance of being successful in this job if he doesn't come right out and do it.
I mean, as Tim Corbin once talked about on our show, I think the term that he used was "that's a different place," which I think, that's a good way to think about it. I need him to do it. There's not many things, Joe, in life that have the opportunity to be better than the Brian Kelly fake Southern accent family, but I think this is up there. I think it's got a chance to do it.
Yeah, no, put everything into it, John. Clean slate. If you want a clean slate, you want people to believe in you, then you call those pigs like you've never called anything in your life.
Oh, I'm looking so much forward to it. Joe, again, like we said to start the show, this is probably one of those days where we could have done a 7-hour show. There's so much going on in the world of sports, but we've got all week to react to it. Tennessee hires a new coach. Kim Caldwell coming into the Lady Vols program. If you missed that conversation, we had it earlier in the 7 o'clock hour on the program. Search Robby and Rexrode wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to do it for us today. Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day. Don't look directly at the sun, at the solar eclipse today. Chasing Big Joe coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.